Welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piscor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
Today we're going to be talking about the Neil Gaiman Masterclass. Is it worth it? But first, we have to let you guys know that we are in part brought to you by the Patreon and the King Kayfabers on the Patreon hanging out with us right now in this live stream recording session. They get access to all of our videos before anybody else, and it mitigates the kayfabe effect. Channel's gotten reasonably popular. We talk about a comic, sells out really quickly on the aftermarket, or if it doesn't, becomes very expensive to the person who isn't in on the ground floor. We are a daily YouTube channel, and we have more than 1,500 videos in our filmography as we speak, which is to say that we might have talked about some of your favorite comics. Give the channel a search. Go on the magnifying glass on the front page of the Kayfabe YouTube channel. Type in the titles of your favorite comics. Check out those episodes. Without further ado, Jimmy, we did an episode where we visited the Alan Moore BBC Maestro course and gave our opinions on that. The Neil Gaiman Masterclass came out first, so I thought it would be a good idea to chat that one up a bit.
Yes, my first impression, Neil Gaiman is really good at articulating sort of his process and giving examples for each of those processes, which makes it easy to listen to, easy to understand, hopefully easy to apply in our own work. But I found just listening to it, I was doing some other stuff, looking for materials, organizing for recording with you, and digging through sketchbooks. So like I had it playing in the background and was very impressed by how compelling it was.
Totally. At the very beginning of the conversation, it's about 4.5 hours of audio or video and audio that you're getting from Gaiman, which is a pretty sizable amount. It's nearly an audiobook's length of material straight from his lips to your ears. At the very beginning, he talked about he kind of does a dalliance at Bard College to extol some of his ideas and thoughts, but the academic setting, the classic academic setting, is small. It's 25 people at a clip, and I'm sure they're fighting to get in there. So his reason for participating in the masterclass is to have that broader audience. The cool thing about the Gaiman piece and the Alan Moore piece is these guys, you have to know your lane, and you got to know that the comic people are going to be wanting something dedicated. So each has the dedicated comic book chapter,
right?
And there's PDFs involved and assignments that are really beautifully laid out and things that go along with the Gaiman Masterclass. Off the top of the bat, I would say sure, yeah, it's totally worth it. As a maker of things, I need some audio in the background, and I'm on the constant hunt for inspiration. So that is sort of what I get out of it. These things are not an end-all be-all. It's not going to make you a great writer. And off the bat, I think I even said so in the Alan Moore piece, and it. You need to hear it a lot of times, especially if you're an enterprising creator out there. And it's that you don't want to become addicted to the how-to books. That's not going to do anything for you. You got to apply. You got to make some bad work. You got to just put some shit out there, leave it to the fates, and receive what comes back and develop a thick skin.
This video is brought to you by the books that we make. Coming out in November, I have Street Angel, Princess of Poverty from Image Comics. This collects all of the Street Angel comics that are not in Street Angel Deadliest Girl Alive, also available from Image Comics. I've also been self-publishing True Crime Funnies you can buy on my website, jimrugg.com. You can also get these from my Patreon, patreon.com/jimrugg, where you can find 1986 and BW zines. As Hulk Grand Design is my contribution to the Grand Design series from Marvel Comics. These are going out of print, so pick this up if your comic shop still has one and you haven't added it to your shelf yet. Ed's latest, Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus, 500 plus pages of all the Hip Hop Family Tree comics, plus 140 bonus pages. X-Men Grand Design collects Ed's 3 X-Men Grand Design volumes in one easy to find trade paperback because several of those original volumes are out of print. And Red Room, Antisocial Network and Trigger Warnings, both available now with a third volume, Crypto Killers, coming in January. And now back to our video.
Yes, I agree with all of that. I would say it reminds me a little bit of like DVD commentary in some ways because
Sure.
he uses so many of his own examples that I actually think if you were just a fan of Neil Gaiman and you weren't a writer, this might still be a very enjoyable thing
Totally.
to go through and to probably revisit a couple of times. Like I've been through it twice now,
Right.
and may go through it again relatively soon. But it's interesting, Ed, because like we're in a similar position in that like we're making stuff. So there's a takeaway from like there's one thing specific that I plan to do this week, possibly tomorrow from this course, which fantastic, you know, like that's money well spent for me. But I do think it would work for somebody that has no aspirations to write and is never going to attempt to write anything. You know, I think there's some entertainment value there. But I also wonder if you're new, if you're 14 and you love a couple of Gaiman things that you've read and you want to be a writer, it might work for a new person because there is some advice for someone who would be just starting out. Like you talk about get the bad writing out of the way. Like you've got to get those reps in. He says it a few times, you know, get the bad words out, just write, you know, get through it, write the next thing that's bad. Don't spend too much time worrying about its quality while you're in that process of writing it. Do the actual work of writing and getting those bad words out, which I think is advice for a newcomer. So it's possible that, you know, maybe you are young and you're aspiring to write. Maybe it works for them too. You know, I'm certainly looking at it through the eyes of trying to make the story I'm working on better, as opposed to like, how do I start this? But maybe it would work for a young writer.
Yeah, there are several of these master classes that I put on as background noise every once in a while. I can't tell you how many times I've been through this Gaiman piece, to be honest. It's just playing it like a movie in the background, you know, a season of a TV show kind of thing. I've done the Alan Moore one, and then two other ones that I really enjoy in terms of writing are it's the David Mamet and the Aaron Sorkin. There's through lines between all of these,
Right?
And that is one of the major ones. Aaron Sorkin talks about, you know, the reason why you go to college is it gives you 4 years to get that garbage writing out of your system, and then you know you could go off and become a pro after that, after you studiously do that sort of shit and have built-in criticism that's in the model that you're sort of like living in. So the through lines are pretty sweet.
And that applies to like you hear cartoonists say it too. Like you got to draw 2,000 bad pages,
Right.
you know. So that was a note I made when I heard Gaiman saying it. I think it's got to be true of anything. Like
Absolutely.
It's a craft. Like there's no shortcut. We've said it a million times on this channel. You really just have to put in that time. You have to get the bad out.
Now another sort of similarity between Gaiman Moore. Well, first off, famously, you know, Gaiman says that he learned how to write comic scripts from Alan Moore. We know that Alan Moore does thumbnails. In the dedicated chapter about comics, you know, Gaiman does thumbnails. They show the thumbnails. They choose Midsummer's Night's Dream story issue of Sandman, the one that won awards. Charles Vesch drew it ultimately, and Gaiman, you know, he makes like a dummy. You know, he takes type and paper and does the Eric Larson comics. You know, takes 11 pieces of paper or you know whatever divided by 4, folds it in half, and okay, on this page, so that he has some command over page turns and reveals, and he talks about that. He mentions that in the Preludes and Nocturnes issue, maybe 6 or 7, where Sandman versus John Dee, and John Dee has the ruby and destroys the ruby, and then it's the big reveal where Sandman's power is unleashed, and you turn the page and there's the big reveal where John Dee's standing on the hand. When it was paginated in the trade paperback, they wanted to keep that same sequence, and they had to draw a fresh page in there. It was like that little John Dee that's in the midst of all that white. That's a fresh page that was put in there. And from my own experience with X-Men Grand Design, like they had to fight for that page to some extent, because you get the whole rate for something like the letterer got paid on that page that has nothing, and you know Mike Drindenberg, who drew this figure this big, got his whole rate for that, and that has to go up the line. You know, Karen Berger has to ask somebody, and then they have to ask somebody, and then it goes to Paul Levitz or Jeanette Kahn, and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll let that happen.
That's the most Kafka-esque absurdity to think about when you consider like how many printings has
Right.
that sold, and we're going to argue over
right?
some 150 bucks page rate or something.
Totally.
Boy, that's comics in a nutshell in a lot of ways.
It was cool. Like he was able to, show you. I make this thumbnail. It lets me know what could be in the page. And I would say for the enterprising comic writer, this part is crucial for them to visit, because every single artist that I know that has worked with a new comics writer has the exact same complaints about this motherfucker wants way too much to happen on one panel or one page. So Gaiman gives you some good game on how to manage that sort of thing.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense to me as somebody making comics, but yes, definitely a writer. And he even talks about some of the strategies of like he's writing dialogue, but it's not necessarily dialogue that's going to be in the script. It's more of like what do I need to communicate here?
It's still a sketch. It's a verbal
right.
sketch.
Right. Yeah, I love that part. I think it's such a powerful tool that he's laying out there. And you're right. I did 3 graphic novels that were the first time the person wrote a comic. And what would happen is exactly what you said. It would be like panels are, you can almost think of them as a paused moment. It's a moment,
Right.
like something happens and then the next panel, the reaction to that maybe. And I would get stuff where it was like 3 things would happen. Like this would happen, this person would react, and then there'd be like the reaction again. And it's like, if you drew that, you would see like, oh, you can't open the door, enter the room, and close the door behind you. That's not one panel, that's 3 panels.
Right.
So very useful in the sense of like, you have a very real, like it's a canvas. You have width and height. That's what you have to work with. And there's only so much space. And by putting it down on a paper, a dummy like that, it shows you very clearly how much space there is, what space things take. Really great. Yeah, I love that tool. And again, explains it so clearly, because a lot of people use some version of this, doing thumbnails. I've been hearing about thumbnails since before I tried drawing my first comic. He explains very clearly how he uses them. And I think that's how almost everybody could probably use them.
There's a one kind of flip piece that he's been known to. If you watched his public talks and stuff, it gets opened up for Q&A, and the first question is always, where do you get your ideas? Mm-hmm. So he talks about that piece, and he's actually has like very thoughtful ideas about that part, about like, where do you get your ideas? And he because he went to his kid's school and it was a little kid that asked, he couldn't diss a little kid. And when he talks about the idea of confluence, where you have maybe these 2 disparate ideas and then you mash them together into a confluence, and then you could have, it's maybe built-in conflict. You could have your story take place. And this is just kind of an aside. I was thinking about that concept because like Harlan Ellison like has his version. Like writers have their version of dissing that term. But if you listen to DVD commentaries, every Hollywood screenwriter and directors, they have such clear ideas, and they can always talk about where these ideas come from, specifically to the piece that you're watching on the screen. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was like an interesting aside, because like artsy fartsy novelists, right, like they are aloof with that, but the Hollywood guys, and I bet you it's just because it's such an expensive enterprise, that kind of like in our Kelly Jones talk, where the editors were asking him about his compositions and shit, and they just wanted to hear that he had like some thoughts in mind. I bet like producers need to have an answer of why you need to travel and bring a crew to Siberia or something,
Yes.
So like that's just an aside.
He dwells on this a lot because he comes at it from different angles, this idea of ideas and
Mm-hmm.
how where these ideas come from. And it's almost a through line through his whole this whole class, I think, because it comes up in different chapters. And I would make notes about different things of like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. And it is all sort of where do ideas come from? They come from a million places. So it's being open to a lot of things. One thing was considering your favorites critically is a
Right.
way to sort of like, it's making your brain maybe step out of its normal pattern.
Yes.
And when that happens, that's when creativity happens. That's where ideas come from. So there's a lot of ways to trigger that. And he really touches on several of those ways throughout the course.
A lot of that is Cartoonist Kayfabe. Like when he's talking about going to his first writer's workshops, and up until that point, when he's reading something, because that's what they would do. They would talk about a novel. It'd be like, a novel of the week kind of thing. He would read something and be like, oh yeah, it's good. And he's in this thing with other published writers, people who are in active readers, like engaged readers, and they're talking about construction and all that kind of shit. So that's like feedback that we get on the channel quite often is like, never looked at it this way, never thought about that. You guys know this, that, whatever. So like for comics, Cartoonist Kayfabe is all you need when it comes to that sort of stuff, man. He gives good kind of assignments throughout the conversation, and one of them is in short story deconstruction. So he starts you off small, and it focuses a lot of energy on the short story.
I love that.
Many chapters, and he said that like some writer that he dug, I forget the name, described that a short story is the last chapter of a novel that you'll never write. These characters are established; they have had whole lives already, and now you're enjoying like the sort of the big moment. And he reads several of his works. He reads the Kris Kringle joint. He reads the one with the genie in the bottle. And these are quick reads. It's 10 minutes of him reading one of his stories. Basically, he gave us tickets to his show in Pittsburgh. He's playing the hits. Like all the stuff that he read to us downtown is in this course.
It did cross my mind, like this course is great self-promo.
Oh, totally.
It's chances are you're not picking this course up if you're not familiar with Gaiman's work, but it is like very self-promo.
Yeah, for sure.
And I have no problem with that at all. You can certainly speak to your own work more intimately than you could speculating on other examples.
And he talks about his bravery of getting stung by yellow jackets and shit like
yes.
that.
He's the hero of this course.
Yes, he is. But talk about the short story, and then because he's smart. You could tell that he deals with people who, at every kind of level of skill, has come up to him, and that the majority are people that he knows, and I know will never write anything. Like, I want to be a writer, and it's just the most basic thing. So he starts you off small, and he's like, okay, you're starting for an idea for a short story. Take a look at something that exists and look at it with fresh eyes. He lays out the Snow White thing. What is Snow White? It's a necrophilic prince with like a vampire girl. Like, the queen is the hero of this thing for trying to put this girl down. Like, it's a weird story. And he had a couple more examples like that. That spoke to me directly because it's the British invasion. These are the guys who looked at our American superheroes with fresh eyes and applied a different level of thought and really changed the game in the States when it comes to comics. So I thought that was like a very insightful little piece to the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good one. He also has a chapter on genre.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting because he talks about mediums versus genre.
Right.
Which I think people mess up a lot. And who kills me is Jim Ross. He refers to professional wrestling as a genre. And in my head, it's like, no, what are you talking about? And I try to justify it, and I think, like, it's a genre of television. Television wrestling is a television show, so you could sort of make that a genre of television show.
A genre of wrestling would be lucha libre or something.
Yeah.
Death matches.
Death matches, exactly, right. Yeah, there are these elements within, but he does a really good job of sort of like talking about medium because that segues into comic books.
Right.
And thinking about like, well, how's your story in these different media? And one of the analogies he uses to illustrate this is comparing, it's an academic paper, I can't remember the author, but it's comparing musicals to pornography.
Right.
And again, like very articulate, but also very, very thoughtful of what you want to command attention. Let's do a comparison between musicals and pornography as in your writing class.
Yeah.
So again, very entertaining, but also very purposeful. Like it's a clear illustration of this idea of genre. And he goes on then to talk about genre versus fiction and the idea of like, there are rules and expectations in genre. You kind of need to know them if that's the way you're working, whereas fiction has a lot more creative freedom in certain ways. So if you're a young writer, maybe you play with fiction. It allows you to be, to go in some strange directions and really, I don't want to say experiment, but just gain that value of turning out all the bad words. So it's pretty interesting. The genre, if you isolated the genre chapter
Right.
on its own, I love genre.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by it, and I think he really brings a lot to the conversation.
Yeah, it's good because he does both things. So like that's the way to hook you by talking, say the word pornography and in relation to musicals, and then he gets into why that is, but then he breaks it down even subtler, where it's like I forget exactly how he says it, but he's like, you can have an important story. Maybe it could be a story about like how the banking system worked in the 1870s, but in the West, in California, but it's not a cowboy
Right.
story. And he breaks both of those down to let you know that if you're selling it as one thing or the other, how you're going to be disappointing your audience if you don't kind of follow some
Yes.
rules. It's another through line between all of the master classes and stuff that I enjoy, is this idea of like, even with avant-garde, there's a rule set. And these writers, they would describe that like, the beauty of a game is the rules. You can't pull out a knife and stab somebody in the throat because they have a football and then you want that. Like there is a set of rules, and that's the beauty and that's the elegance of the thing. And we like to think that within an art form or medium that you could be lawless, but even the most avant-garde cartoonists, to some extent, like they have some knowledge of the trappings of the medium or genre so that they can pervert it to their own uses. Pretty cool.
Yes, very much.
It brings there's a lot of food for thought when it comes to this stuff.
Do you think the knowledge of this material, this is outside Gaiman,
Yeah.
although he's an example of it, do you think that this is just you learn it because you love the creative process, the writing, the storytelling? I feel like we're familiar with this. I don't feel like I learned it in a class.
Yeah, I think it's through application. It's literally the stuff. I bristle very much at the academic approach, and these master classes are built for me, in as much as like I do not want to hear from some academic book learning person about how to write something. Let me talk to a guy who is consistently on that New York Times bestseller list, that has a giant fan base, and all, like I need to know his information. That's the master classes are set up. David Lynch master class, and like it's all the best people of their chosen fields. So these things are set up for me, and I do think that it's what makes Scott McCloud understanding comics great, is that he clearly was a user of the medium, of the form, got thousands of pages under his belt, and was able to articulate on paper the stuff that we kind of know. Like as a maker, you kind of know it on an intuitive sense, but it's artists are emotional, man. It's like from the heart kind of stuff, from the gut. But he's able to articulate it scientifically, put it down there, and that's what Gaiman's able to do with this part. Maybe like a Tarantino or somebody couldn't like articulate the hows and the whys for why he chose to do this thing. Intuitive pattern recognition from all the flicks he watched, whatever. But like Gaiman, because he is a wordsmith, we've covered a lot of his words. We've orated some of his words from some of his depositions and things. So he knows how to weave the words in order to make things happen. So it's it's not unlike there's that great TED talk that Jill Bolte Taylor's her name. She's a neuroscientist, and she had a stroke, and she could talk about exactly the things that she experienced from the point of view of a neuroscientist about what it's like having a stroke.
I don't know how you remembered her name.
I'll
I know
never
this
forget
TED Talk,
it.
but I don't know her name.
It's the TED Talk that made me learn what TED Talks are.
Right.
Like that's the first TED Talk as far as I'm concerned. Can we wrap up, Jimmy, with the rules of writing? Maybe you got a couple of big points you want to hit before we get to.
I do have one, but it may fit into the rules of writing here. So hit those, and if it doesn't cover it, I'll
Cool.
wrap this up quickly.
So these are some rules that he acquired over the years, and then he added a couple, Jimmy, and I think we could speak to each one of them. So this is the Neil Gaiman Writing Masterclass. So it could be applied to all media, probably any creative pursuit. Rule 1: write. You want to make comics? Make comics. As a young kid going to show my samples off, the Marvel guys would be like, okay, you need to work on this, or you need to work on this. The Mike Allreds, the Matt Wagners would be like, show me a comic. You know, the people who make comics are like, show me a comic. The guys who draw comics are like, your drapery is not sound. Two, most important, another through line through probably every masterclass that exists. Finish what you write. Make a comic.
You know what's funny is I've heard so many cartoonists say both of these things.
Sure. Yeah, you got to finish the thing. And he illustrates it like you learn so much more by finishing something that might not be that great. First off, you're not setting out to make something not great. You're doing your best. You learn so much more doing that than writing 3 pages of unfinished perfection.
Yes. I heard a cartoonist explain this, and it was in terms of, I was looking at his sketchbook. I'm like, oh man, this stuff's beautiful. You know, he's a great artist, right? So the chance to flip through a sketchbook, amazing. And had him on a podcast. It was Farrell Dalrymple. And I would ask everybody, like, what was their advice for somebody, you know, starting out or whatever. And his thing was finish the drawing, you know. And the interesting thing in a sketchbook is sometimes you started drawing over on the side here. How are you going to wrap that up? It was such a great problem solve, especially if you make comics, because we're often stuck by panels. So like, how do you make that into a good looking composition? And I think it's something everybody, I would guess almost everybody watching here has scribbled in the margins of their notebooks, on a phone call, whatever, absentmindedly during a boring class. You can learn a lot from about composition by finish that sketch.
Totally.
And of course, finish the comic, finish the story, finish the writing. But that finish thing is a good piece of advice, because it is like, how do you get out of this position? You know, when you stop working is whenever you go, I don't know what to do next. I'm stuck. So if you force yourself through that, talk about a skill that you can apply to everything.
Right. And specifically when it comes to like writing, or we'll say story media, Mamet will say that, you know, everybody can write a super good, compelling first act. And he illustrates in his conversation that if you are stuck, fantastic, because that the viewer doesn't know where it's going either.
Yeah.
So now this is where you become a writer. This is where you have to like figure the thing out. You know, I'm doing the daily strips, right? And got over 100 now. So at about 80 of them, I've injected enough like little bits that I could start connecting things and you know, adding more to the stew. But now there are like little pieces, and it could be as simple as just a phrase, or somebody mention, you know, their cousin or something in passing. Well, maybe that cousin's the reason why something is going down. You know, like you could keep your eyes on that, and you could keep adding to the Katamari Damashi bowl. Well, I cut you off.
It's perfect. I said, you know, maybe we'd hit this note in this. And the note that I had is caring about what happens next as the writer. You know, when you get to that point and you're not sure what happens next, great. Same, the audience doesn't know what happens next, but you need to care about that part.
Right.
And one of Gaiman's advice is, what do the characters want? You know, when you hit these, like, not sure where to go here, it's exactly what you said about your comic strip. It's where it's like, dig into what you've done so far. His advice, one of them was reread what you've written so far.
Right.
Because chances are the answer's there. And that came out again and again in that writing class that we took. I remember being impressed by that, where it's like, oh, you've already written the answer. You just need to go back with your fresh eyes and look at it. So I think that's really a good piece. And he even says it whenever the comics chapter, he talks about Karen Berger giving him a piece of critical advice on Sandman 19, the Midsummer Night's Dream. And her thing was, I don't know why do I care about this?
Right.
And it's such a good question to ask. Like, I taught at SVA for 10 years, and it was a story class where the students they generate an original story.
Yeah.
And that was often the question I would have. It's like, I get it. You care because you're paying tuition, or you know more about this than I do. Why do I care as a reader?
And in relation to this specific thing, Neil Gaiman himself went to an open air play of Shakespeare, Midsummer's Night's Dream, wanted to make a comic about it. And
his idea came from seeing that play and watching in the course of the play go from daytime to nighttime. And it was almost like setting is what just captivated him in this.
And it's the dream and all that stuff. So now you have this thing, but that is no plot. That's no plot. That's masturbation. That's self-indulgence. So Karen Berger like asked the question, and then he wove a very heartbreaking narrative out of that.
Yes. So I think that's a great thing to keep in mind, that finish it, because usually that sticking point is the moment. It's where you can become you can go to that next level if you figure out how to work through that.
Absolutely, man. So rule 3, this is very important, man. Send to publishers. And he is open-minded about that. It doesn't mean print publishers. He talks about websites that are starving for content. Send it to places where the thing can be seen. And I would suggest that even something as simple as your social media is a publishing venue. And the crowd of public opinion, the court of public opinion, could make or break you. Like I think about in relation to my own stuff, like when I had that piece of real estate on that website, boingboing.net, for 3 months, for 12 pieces, like for 3 months I was putting strips up there, and they would have nominal success. And my version of success is like who's sharing it, who's commenting, how many people. And then I put up Hip Hop Family Tree, and it's 1,000x. In the course, one day changed my life, changed my whole life, took me out of abject poverty, changed the whole course of my entire life. So your social media could do that. You put something up on the gram, and it gets your 100 likes or whatever. You could put something up there that could get 1 million, and then the algorithm fucking now loves you, is sending you to more people. Now you're acquiring a big ass audience. So now you got to not have that sophomore jinx or that sophomore curse. You got this audience that you've now cultivated. Keep going.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because that's ultimately what you're aiming for. I always say, like, you're not just building the skills and the craft, like you're also building that audience, because it doesn't come overnight. It's not like once you think you have the perfect story that suddenly the audience is there. Like you kind of you build them together.
Right.
Yeah. I like that a lot, of putting it in front of people.
Yeah, and it's. I think that is the professional thing to do. It's kind of, it's a difference between like the Ramones and the Clash or something, though, or like the Clash was influenced by the Ramones for doing the work, and the Ramones were like, you don't have to be perfect, just do it. And then they did, and then they started to do their thing. That goes into part 4, by the way.
Well, the last piece I have on the putting it in front of people is, it may not even be an audience that you're building. It may be the agent that really connects with the work that you're doing, your voice. It can be a lot of things. Like that can come back positively in a lot of ways. And some of the negative that comes back too can be an overall positive. It can be a learning experience even when it doesn't work the way you want it to the first time. Because usually it's not going to work the way you want it to the first time.
Absolutely, man. Rule number 4, very, very important. And you could tell that Gaiman has talked to a lot of kids, man, a lot of like sort of rank kind of amateurs. Number 4 is refrain from rewriting. And that is a very, very nice British way of saying don't polish a turd. You got to do your first work. And chances are, fucking virtuoso, genius, you're average at best. So what? Do another piece after. Like take that energy that you would apply to rewriting to try to make this perfect tome. Just do the second one, then do the third one.
Yeah, I think this relates to number 2. Finish it, because in comics it may be I'm redrawing this panel or I'm redrawing this page over and over until I just can't even think about this anymore. And what have I done? Page 2 7 times.
We could name.
Finish the draft.
Yeah, and this is very important for certainly people in our chosen medium of comics to hear, because one similarity between all of the best people in comics that I've ever known is a little bit of compulsion, a little bit of OCD. You got to get it under control, and I'm sure you and I could go one for one naming names of people who spin those wheels into oblivion, and we just don't see their work anymore because they just psychologically fuck themselves. So refrain from rewriting. Polish, like that's not to say you don't polish something. You do a couple of drafts. Stephen King's on writing. He talks about he does 2 drafts and what he calls a polish. That's not really rewriting. That's tying. That's shoring up the ship. That's not a complete rewrite. 5, when it comes back, because it inevitably will, send it out again. And this one spoke so close to me because it's literally how my comic book career got started. I did like a 5-pager on my own time while I was working at the call center. I did a 4-pager, and I sent them to the anthologies of the day, The Last Days of 00, and Top Shelf Anthology, and the Drawn and Quarterly Anthology. And then little ones would spring up, Blood Orange, or, the little ones would spring up, the SPX anthologies, and routinely get rejected. But I worked hard on these strips. And what am I going to do? Because Joey Jerkoff over here, who has a day job but gets to edit a fucking anthology, says no, like my shit is no good. Nah, man, I'll either make my own mini comics, so like you get enough to put something together that you could take to a convention. I chose to send my works for some feedback to cartoonists that I liked, and that included Harvey Picar, who gave me a job. So it might not be good to Joey Jerkoff, who has a day job, works in a cubicle, but got a chance to edit some anthology once. Might not have worked there, but it worked for the guy that is coming hot off of a Hollywood movie, who's getting inundated with book offers and needs to find somebody who will draw it for $100 a page.
Yeah, and there are a million versions of this too. It might not even be that Joey Jerkoff didn't like it. It might be that Joey Jerkoff didn't even see it.
Yeah.
I knew a guy when I started Street Angel at SLG. It was another guy who was being published by them, new comics. So we were, you know how you do the tour together. And he told a story about he had sent it to SLG, didn't hear anything, self-published it, ran into them at a show, and they said, "We love this book. You ought to. We'll publish this." And he's like, "I sent it to you."
Right.
Things happen.
Happened.
They didn't see it, or who knows? Maybe they saw it at a Friday afternoon for a minute while they were the sky was falling in some other direction. You just don't know. So
Right.
like you can't take it personally, and you just keep doing it. Is absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. That happened with WYSIWYG, by the way. The guys at Fantagraphics were like, they hit me up after it was announced from Top Shelf, and they're like, "You didn't get our email?" And I'm like, "You sent no email." So anyhow, all right, the sixth and final piece, man, of this little rule set that Gaiman clearly illustrates in his Masterclass. While all that stuff is going on, and you're sending your work out, and you're resending it out, you got to start the next thing. You got to start putting together the next piece. You don't sit there putting all your eggs in one basket, waiting for that one venue, Esquire magazine or somebody to like get back in touch with you, and then you'll send it out to another one and then another one. Nah, dude, we're going spam. Spam that shit out, and fuck those people, man. Go work on the next shit so that when they come back, the first real hints that you're onto something, the feedback that you get is wishy-washy in that way, where it's like, you might have something, kid. Send us your next thing. And if you have something in the chamber, it proves a lot professionally. It proves that you could hit some marks. It proves that you're not just a one-hit wonder. It proves that you're serious. If the second thing reads better, they might be able to invest a little bit more into you a little bit early. I really do feel like the medium of comics, because this is Cartoonist Kayfabe, I do really feel like that the medium of comics is probably the last mass media where the publishers will invest in people a little bit. The famous scenario in the music biz was Bruce Springsteen, E Street Band. First 2 albums, dog shit, didn't do anything. And then the third album was the one that put him over. The music industry is not investing 3 albums. They might not invest 3 songs into you. They want you to prove on your own SoundClouds and shit that you are somebody before they put 1 cent into you. The medium of comics is different. And there is opportunity there to be a complete nobody and to really charm the pants off of the editors and publishers to get the opportunity. And they might put it out and it might not do exactly what they were hoping for, or that might just be you shaking hands with the retailers, basically saying like, I'm a new guy in town, I have this comic, you gave it a shot. The shop owners don't have zillions of dollars to be thrown around to an unproven quantity, but they know your name now. You put out the next piece after that, you build up bigger. It's just like when you getting started in the game, even self-publishing, and you go to your convention for the first time. You sell a couple. You can sell a little bit of stuff, man. You might even be in the red still by the time that the show ends.
Probably.
Go to the next year. You get a table at the same spot. I always advise, don't go home with any of your comics that first time. You trade to everybody. You give those comics away you sell what you can, and on Sunday, you introduce yourself to other cartoonists, and that might create some opportunity with anthologies and things like that. The next year, maybe you're still in the red, but a little bit less. Eventually, you have your audience, but there's a tenacity that's required, and that's personal investment, and that's going to be your own capital investment for a little while. But do you believe in yourself? Do you really think you got it? Then put your fucking money where your mouth is.
Great advice.
That's the lessons there. So and that's pulled directly from that conversation. Now, is it going to make a shit writer a better writer? I don't know about that. That responsibility is yours, and yours alone. Will it make a good writer better? I think so.
Yeah, it's hard to judge if you're, depending on what position you're in, how this is going to land. But I do think there's stuff for people probably at every level.
Yeah.
And I do think it's entertaining. So at the very least, you get several hours of Neil Gaiman entertaining you. Hey, man, thumbs up for me. I enjoyed it. Like I say, I plan to watch it again.
Good to go.
Kayfabers, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell so that we can notify you when new videos are available. The vids are brought to you by the books that we make. And before you is a very robust section of the books that we have available. To begin, there's the Hip Hop Family Tree Omnibus, collecting all of my Hip Hop Family Tree works. It's the 10-year anniversary of Hip Hop Family Tree, 50th anniversary of hip hop as a culture. The books are going quick, the books are going fast, and they're flying off the store shelves, so get it quickly if you want it in any sort of timely fashion. Not the only holiday effort, we've got the trade paperback for the X-Men Grand Design Trilogy from Marvel Comics is going to be available in stores on November 14th. Got the copies of that right now. 2 trade paperbacks of Red Room are out there, Antisocial Network and Trigger Warnings, with a third coming to you called Crypto Killers in 2024 January. Jimmy, what do you have?
Street Angel, Princess of Poverty is my next release. It'll be out at the end of November from Image Comics. You should be able to get that wherever books are bought and sold. It is a companion piece to Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive, also from Image Comics. These 2 books, besides looking good on your shelf like a set next to each other, collect all of the Street Angel comics that I have made so far. So pick up both of those if you haven't already. I have been self-publishing True Crime Funnies. That's a collection of nonfiction stories. The 1986 zine celebrating the greatest year in comics history, and the BW zine celebrating the black and white explosion and self-publishing boom of the 80s and early 90s. These are all available on patreon.com/JimRugg if you want to read them now. Otherwise, follow me and I'll let you know whenever they're available to buy from my website, jimrugg.com. And Hulk Grand Design, my contribution to the Grand Design series. I believe these are out of print, so pick it up if you haven't already whenever you see it in a comic shop. These are disappearing fast and hard to tell when they'll be back.
The books are the most important part of keeping the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel going. We are a daily YouTube channel with more than 1,500 videos available to you right now. Give the channel a search. Go on the front page, hit the magnifying glass, search for your favorite comics. Check out those episodes. If we did not talk about your favorite comics, let us know what they are in the comments, and we will push those comics a little bit higher on our to-read piles. The Patreon helps subsidize the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel. 3 different levels of participation there, but the King Kayfabers, the top dogs, they get all the videos that we shoot before anybody else gets to see them. They're hanging out with us in the live stream chat room right now as we are recording, and we always shoot a couple extra videos, at least 1 extra video, so there's a big queue of videos that develop that only the Kings have access to before we release those, later on down the line when Jimmy and I have to take a break or something like this. Once again, the books are the most important part, but there are a few other ways to support the channel. Jimmy, let the people know.
You can subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe newsletter at the links below this video to keep up on what we have coming out and when. You can also pick up Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts, merchandise, hats, cups, mugs, stickers, and lots more of the Cartoonist Kayfabe
Enterprise
at our spread shop. That link is also under this video.
So there it is. We laid it out. You have numerous ways that you can support the channel and keep these videos coming to you on a regular basis. Jimmy, without further ado, Let's get out of here, but first, please give everybody their marching orders.
Make more comics.